other guests. We're talking about building an integrated knowledge system in conservation futures, reshaping conservation into the future. So we've got Dr. Rebecca Spindler. She's the Director of Conservation Futures. Rebecca has been engaged in the Australian and international conservation science sector for over 20 years with experience in USA, China, and South America when working for the Smithsonian Institution and in Australia in government and non-government agencies. After 10 years as Head of Science and Conservation at Taronga Conservation Society, she joined Bush Heritage Australia as Executive Manager, Science and Conservation. Her team guides conservation and knowledge building strategies, facilitates inclusive planning and generates collaborative approaches to science, conservation action and best practice impact reporting. Rebecca is a co-founder in the Conservation Futures Project with Professor Brendan Wintle from University of Melbourne. So Rebecca's in the hood. And then we've also got Oliver Costello, a Bundjalung man, and he's from Bush Heritage Australia. So Oliver is a Bundjalung man from the Northern Rivers and has been actively engaged in cultural land management projects. He believes strongly in the role of Aboriginal culture as a keystone to maintaining livelihoods, supporting identity, connection to country, and enabling healthy and regenerative communities to care for country. He works part-time for Bush Heritage Australia as a project manager, traditional knowledge on conservation futures, was an Indigenous contributing author to the Extreme Events chapter of the 2021 State of the Environment report, started the Fire Sticks Initiative and was a founding director of both the Jagun Alliance, Aboriginal Corporation, and Fire Sticks Alliance, Indigenous Corporation. He's a board member, a board director of the Natural Hazards Research Australia and vice president of the Northern Rivers Fire and Biodiversity Consortium. Holds a Bachelor of Arts in Adult Education and Community Management from the University of Technology, Sydney, and has a broad range of experience in natural cultural resource management, cultural fire joint management partnerships, culturally significant species and threatened species management. Oliver works to support a range of research, policy, advocacy, education, and on-ground projects. He is passionate about Aboriginal leadership, empowerment, partnerships, and recognition of cultural knowledge and practice. Will you please welcome Oliver and Rebecca to the stage?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Right. Firstly, I just take a minute and pay respects to our elders past, present and future, acknowledge we're under country. I'm a Bundjalung man from the Northern River, so it's always really important for me to, pay respect to country wherever I go.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the Aranda elders and recognise elders past, present and emerging here. It's been such a joy to be welcomed. I thank all Australian Aboriginal people for the generosity of spirit that I encounter consistently. And as I stand on Australian soil, I recognise that I stand on Aboriginal land wherever I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Beck. So yeah, today we're going to spend a bit of time talking about an exciting project that we're working on, Conservation Futures. So yeah, our goal is to help guide the transition from declining health of country and environmental values in Australia to thriving, resilient landscapes to protect our nature and support prosperity in regional landscapes. So in short, basically we need, and like we've been talking about for the last couple of days, it's been really great seeing and hearing from all these expertise. We need to do things differently. But we don't need to radically change everything. We need to learn from country. We need to learn from things that work, and we need to better share that information. So Conservation Futures is really about trying to create that sharing place. I like the analogy of the Coolaman, Jimmy. So, that's really what we're trying to do is create a place where we can bring data and knowledge, stories, bring people together to share that information, help make more informed decisions about how we manage country, how we prioritise investment, and how we work together to, do all the important work that needs to be done to heal country.
I'll just briefly introduce the team. So Ollie is one of our project managers with Joe Griffin, and they're really the engine behind all of making this integrated knowledge system work and making sure that it's done in the right way. As Jimmy mentioned, Brendan is my co-conspirator. So this actually came through from a lot of Bush Heritage Aboriginal engagement officers who needed a safe and secure place to hold knowledge that wasn't ours, wasn't theirs. It belonged to our Aboriginal partners, but we had no password protected, really strong IT platform to be able to store that knowledge in an appropriate way. And then we have a few other actors in the knowledge. We have Joel, who we've just stolen from Terry Jenkins' office. He's holding us to account in terms of legal agreements as well as project management. Rachel Morgan is working out of the University of Melbourne and is one of the key drivers of this project as well, helped by Heather Christensen, and Skip Woolley is our data specialist. So he's the one that's actually constructing that IT model and making sure that all those legal agreements are able to be held up using those IT structures. We're also supported by an operational strategy group, which has a lot of advisors across Australia and a really strong cultural advisory group. Again, making sure that they keep us honest and that we're doing things the right way.
Also, just a quick shout out to Jo, who job shares with me, and she really holds a whole heap of weight in the team, and wouldn't be able to do it without her. Oh yeah, this is you too.
We just wanted to pull on a thread from yesterday's session, which we thought was really applicable and very sensible. And a big shout out to Auntie Linda, who presented there. She is, good timing, walking into the room as she presented this yesterday, and also recognise all of the people at CSIRO that pulled this together from Our Knowledge, Our Way. And in Bush Heritage, we call this the right way, which is not to say we're telling people how to do things the right way. This is what we've heard from our partners around how they would want to be approached and engaged. And it very much reflects the same sort of principles in Our Knowledge, Our Way. So it's worth reflecting on this. These are the principles that we want the system to live up to. We want to be held accountable to these very same principles, and reflecting on what we're trying to do here is really build a solution and provide an avenue to be able to do this in a structured way that helps people feel safe and use information in the right way.
Yeah, so as I said before, it's about creating that place. And, you know, for me, one of the, how I got involved, I wasn't looking for another job. As you see, I've got lots of things going on. But I was actually having breakfast with Stephen Van Leeuwen one day, and we were working on some stuff together. And I was just talking about the need for a system to be able to share, like there's all this data being collected, you know, particularly in the cultural land management space. We've got all these ranger programs, IPAs, we're seeing all this amazing work happening out there, and everyone's always asking for, you know, case studies and what works and all this sort of stuff. And we were in the work that we were doing, we're seeing all this, you know, like data being collected essentially by the Commonwealth about all these programs. And we're like, in a sense, like, how do we get that information shared? But also from a cultural point of view, how do we protect and manage that cultural intellectual property? You know, so for me, I've done a lot of work around cultural fire management, worked on state environment report. You know, I saw these devastating fires, you know, like I live, you know, in what people see as rainforest country up in the, just below the nightcap range there. You know, we got evacuated. People were freaking out. People in the neighborhood, fire had never been a thing for them. You know, obviously I've been around a bit of fire, and, you know, I wasn't overly concerned because I was thinking, you know, more about how fire behaves in the landscape and the type of landscape we're in. But it was unusual. It was an unusual time. And then to be able to then go and see like and then be thinking, well, if this is happening here, you know, like August, we had fires out of control in August. You know, we were still doing burning. We were burning, and RFS were trying to tell us, oh, no, you can't burn. And it was like, oh, but the country here is right for burning. But other parts of the landscape, things were getting out of control. And I started worrying. I started saying to people, getting very concerned about, you know, as the fire season moved south. At that point, there was no fires on the south coast, you know. And so, and I'm digressing here, but knowing that sense of knowledge about country and how fire behaves and the impacts of that. But then when you go to look at the data, you can't see those stories. You can't see those impacts on all of those cultural values and heritage. And so you can't really kind of build that case around what those impacts are. So being able to kind of bring that knowledge together, and a good example is, you know, we've got cultural sites that are really important, you know, dreaming stories, and have, you know, just like here when I walked up the hill, you know, end up on a dreaming story. All these are important stories. And some of those stories aren't to be told to everyone, but being able to engage, you know, fire agencies and land managers and say, in these places, can you not do these things? Before you go and do this, can you come and talk to our old people, get our old people in places of decision making? And there are not adequate pathways for that. It's really, you know, there aren't appropriate protocols in place in a lot of data management, a lot of planning, a lot of different stages of government, NGOs. And so we really need a place to be able to start to draw that information that people want to share or have a point for people to be able to engage with those knowledge holders and get them in the room, get that knowledge that they want to share in that decision-making space so we can make more informed decisions about how we go forward, manage country.
Perfect. Thanks, Ollie. So what we're dedicated to doing, as I've said, is sort of make sure that we have really strong agreements and understanding with full prior and informed consent around that knowledge sharing, and turn that into a knowledge system so that we have the IT structures that really shore that up. Because one of the really strong risks of not having this knowledge available is that it's not included in decision making. And that's where Duke and Gorge is allowed to happen because, we didn't know. Yeah, okay. Let's not believe that. Let's have the appropriate amount of cynicism around that. But they're allowed to say that because there isn't a system there. When Aboriginal people are not standing in the room, there is not a system, as there is for white people, to be able to say, this is what these people want. This is what these people know about. And here is the information that's important to be incorporated in this kind of decision making. We want to try and level that playing field and make sure that true Indigenous, strong cultural knowledge and aspirations is absolutely built into decisions. We're not making people's decisions for them. We're trying to provide a platform so that everybody across the country, government, academics, NGOs, individual Aboriginal groups themselves can make much better informed decisions with much better local knowledge and integrate that with much better global understanding of climate change and the future that that's going to bring, as well as the national trends that we're already seeing.
Yeah, and I guess it's really about creating that safe cultural space. You know, it may be that knowledge holders want to come and use a system and they don't want to share information. They just maybe want to come and have a space that's easy to. A lot of the information that we're still building the system. A lot of information that we'll have in it is publicly available information. You can go to different places and find that information, but it's not necessarily easy to see those different layers of information together unless you've got that skill set to do the mapping or the data analysis yourself, or you have people in your teams. And so a lot of organisations, NGOs, Aboriginal groups, a lot of people outside of government and more well-resourced organisations don't have that capability. So we want to kind of create a place where it's easier to do some of that stuff. But if knowledge holders want to share that information, they have data sovereignty, they have control over the information, they can share parts of that information. So making sure that we've got that First Nations input into the work that we do is really critical. And that's what we've been working towards. We've got a strong group of Indigenous people in the team. We've got advisory functions and networks and stuff. So really trying to build a safe space there to really create that understanding and also that sense of opportunity. We've seen over the last few days so much opportunity, and we really think that being able to create that transparency, that accountability, being able to sort of share that knowledge is really a critical pathway for a lot of the success of the future.
Just before we hop on to case studies, it's probably helpful to make a confession. It's not built yet. So I'm going to give you an idea of what I think our vision looks like for what this IT system will do, which is allow knowledge holders from any background to be able to input their knowledge, and they declare themselves what level of security that information has. And that can be multiple levels of security for each different knowledge element. They say who gets to see it, they say when they get to see it, they give them a password, they take the password back, they have complete control. So I, as a white person with no Aboriginal heritage, female, and work for a conservation NGO, and I promise not to give any information to the mining agencies, I will be able to log in and my universe that I'm allowed to see will automatically be there. I don't need to be careful about looking, not looking, deciding what I'm allowed to see. That is already decided for me by the knowledge holders who've put that information into the system.
Thanks, Beck. And so, we're talking about building this integrated knowledge system, and it's got all these potential opportunities based on how we build it. But a really important thing for us is to build it with people and understand the application of that knowledge in practice. So we've got a few case studies. This Yambala is one of our more well-progressed one. This was a yarning circle, a bit of planning we did. Beck wanted me to mention the amazing sausages that Jim cooked on the fire. We're all there yarning up around the fire. They were on the fire for ages, and they turned out to be really beautiful. But the most amazing thing was just being able to sit around and talk about the potential of, in this situation, you've got Jim, who's a, I think 3rd or 4th generation settler, on his sort of family's lands, and wanting to give back, wanting to have that land, have custodianship in place over that land. He's got some ecotourism and some different initiatives going on there. And one of the things that he's done is opened up that land for Black Duck Foods to come and do some of their seed collection, experimentation. They've been doing some cultural fire, and so just being able to kind of create that space where First Nations people can have that connection to country again, can get on country and look at ways that they can generate income that can provide more sustainable and regenerative practices on that land. And so we think that's really critical to the sort of work we're doing in Conservation Futures, because most of the landscape is held under private title, and we think that more landholders should be giving access to First Nations people to be able to be back on their country. Looking around, there's just like when we hear all these mountains, all these ridges, they have stories, they have connections, and a lot of knowledge holders haven't been able to get into these places for a long time. For hundreds of years, they've been essentially locked up through private title. So getting that access back and looking at ways to be able to support landholders, and then being able to understand what is the data, what are the stories, what are the what is the information that was going to help improve decision making. Where where do certain conservation actions happen? They want to do some plantation sort of stuff as well. So how do you do that? So trying to ask these tricky questions about carbon, biodiversity, cultural values, and create a place for sharing that knowledge and being able to communicate some of that to other landholders, so that the work that's happening here, we had other landholders, neighbours coming on. How do we grow that locally, but also how do we grow that across the landscape and make sure that First Nations voices are leading those discussions?
Thanks, Ollie. I did just want to add to the sausage story. So not only the sausages were just incredibly awesome. It's now my new recipe for put sausages on fire, establish 17-person yarning circle. Then once you've done all of that, the sausage is going to be perfect, because they were the best sausages I have ever had. They were really awesome. One of the great things that came out of that yarning circle, though, was a couple of instances and stories from Uncle Bruce Pascoe himself about mother trees that had been knocked down in that area, and everybody knew they were culturally sacred. They were really critically important, but it wasn't written down anywhere. So the council knocked them down anyway, that for fire risk. And the concerted wisdom is that they weren't a risk in any way, shape or form, and they were still knocked down. Imagine if we'd already had the integrated knowledge system and that was there. We were able to have many of the elders telling stories about the importance of these trees, and they could, for a period of time, make that publicly available. It could have been the foundation of a campaign to save those trees, because it's now in a system that is available to the public to make some noise, to write letters to councillors, to get the word out, and it's in a system that can be accessed.
Just a little segue into this. Just after we had that yarning circle, we we're just walking up because in this landscape you can see how beautiful and it is. And yeah, I was there and they'd done some burning. You can sort of see the greener areas. They'd done a bit of burning about a year before, and I've got a bit of experience around fire, and so I was there yarning about the burn they did, and then Uncle Bruce was like, because I was saying that the other areas there looked pretty good to burn, and Uncle Bruce threw me a box of matches and said, yeah, let's see. And so just that, I guess, trying to draw down to that cultural authority and practice, and just being able to kind of put fire on the ground and get for some people there, first time they've been able to see a fire trickle around and see a different kind of fire, and just I guess trying to create those opportunities for learning is really critical.
Thanks, Doc. One of the newer partners that we've just brought on board is the owners of Condaparinga, which is this enormous, gorgeous mountain that has a white name, but that's irrelevant. It's called Condaparinga. And so we're partnering with the Jungan people to look after country. They've finally got a determination after 14 years of trying hard to get a determination across this landscape. it's impacted by a number of other landholders in the neighbouring area. So we're trying to bring together a mini regional plan and an agreement around how we're all going to work towards healing country and bringing country back. But they're not going to ask us specifically to help with that storage of knowledge, to help with ecological and cultural mapping, to understand what happens with climate change and where we do need to restore, making sure that those nature-based solutions are really going to be viable for generations. So those benefits are really multi-generational as we go forward. Through all of that, we'll also be helping out with some we'll be doing a healthy country plan, facilitating a healthy country plan that all is entirely their knowledge. They will own it, they will manage it, they will run it. But we'll be able to generate a lot of that knowledge that underpins the decisions that they need to make through the integrated knowledge system. One of the national case studies is bush heritage, and I mentioned in the introduction at the yarning circle, I have a huge weight on my shoulders around a lot of decision making that I need to make about country, and because of all sorts of different things, sometimes I'm doing that without the benefit of traditional owner knowledge and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge really across Australia. I rely on a lot of cultural and ecological mapping, and find consistently that a lot of that cultural information just isn't available to me, and isn't available to me in a particular time frame that sometimes I might need. I've drawn down a lot of information for bush heritage around the climate context within which we're working, and as somebody or a few people have mentioned, that's really depressing. It's really depressing, and the pressure to act now is well and truly on. There's an enormous opportunity for us right now. We've gone through a large evaluation program for all of the 37 projects that we have. Bush heritage works across about 11.3 million hectares, most of which is in partnership with Aboriginal people on their land. So what we do is come together and have a collective understanding of materiality, what's important. You can't concentrate on everything all at once, and so many of our Aboriginal partners understand that fundamentally. So they have key areas, they have key ecosystems, they have key species that are totemic, that are drivers of ecosystem health, or they're indicators of ecosystem health. What we need to do now with all of this climate context is take that materiality context and what we call conservation targets, make them really key and put a climate change lens over it, and understand the RAD principle, which is a new paper that's, well, came out in 2011. It's not exactly new, but it's now being applied really across a lot of national parks in America, and we're taking it on as well. So the RAD is resist. What are the things, as climate change starts to advance, what are the things that we are just going to protect in place? It's not okay that they're okay over there. They actually have to be okay right here, because they're drivers of ecosystem health, or they are culturally critically important. So what is it that we have to do to resist the changes that are going to come as a measure of climate change? I'll take direct next. What are the things that are going to transition, and how do we direct that transition to make sure that it's functional? It is critically important that we understand from traditional owners, with their understanding and not only their aspirations of what's important, but how do we bring that innovation? What are some new ways of thinking about how we manage this land to really drive that functional transition in areas that are going to change? And what do we just need to accept? Where those changes are going to be irresistible, where we have no avenues for changing things, what are the things that we need to put in place now to try and keep everybody as healthy as we possibly can, while we accept those irresistible changes of climate change? And that's where so much of that conservation innovation comes about. It comes into our healthy country planning, and it's all about that knowledge management. That will be all that knowledge will be managed in an appropriate way, and where that knowledge is not bush heritage, is not mine, we won't get to see any of that. It all stays well and truly in the hands of the knowledge holders themselves. No worries. So we've got a few other examples and a few other case studies that are in development, but fundamentally we just want to start the conversation. So we're really keen to hear from anyone. We'd love your questions. We'd love to have a chat. We'd love to be held to account. What have we not thought of? What are the opportunities that we've missed? Where are the pitfalls that we're about to fall into? We're really keen to talk with as many people. We've been in lots of discussions with Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people really across the country already, but very, very keen to hear from other people about your thoughts, and very keen to learn from you all and to go to the next discussion. Thanks.